wanted to buy a Mahler 5 when I was a student, I'd go to the local CD shop and I'd go and listen to 3 or 4 Mahler 5s to decide what I wanted. And then I might plonk on one, I'd get settled on one.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3-4 months later, I'm a bit like, I really liked the sound of that Chicago one. I've got a choice. I can not really eat lunch for 2 days and take that money and go and buy that CD. I'll make a sandwich from home. I'll take that in instead of buying lunch. And I used to do that.
Today's episode is a conversation with someone I consider a kindred spirit and someone that I have a lot of shared background with, which seems to be the case ever increasingly on this podcast. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are talking with Jeremy Watt, who is a member of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. He spent 16 years before that freelancing in the UK, in Europe, being in London, playing with groups like the Philharmonia and the London Symphony Orchestra, many other groups. And then he got this position after 16 years of freelancing. That is super cool and also somewhat rare in my experience. So we talk about that, but we also talk about this pandemic project that he started. He was able to carve out just a little bit of time from childcare duties and other things that we're all dealing with in the pandemic situation. And he started recording all 4 parts of the Colin Brumby suite and got really into this project, and it actually turned out to be surprisingly satisfying for him. So we talk about that. We talk about his musical career, lots of great stories along the way. Jeremy's a wonderful storyteller, as you'll hear in this. Really interesting person. I had such a great time connecting with him. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, Practisma, and Modacity. More on them later, but let's dig into this conversation and hear a little bit of this suite with the wonderful Jeremy Watt. Oh, there. Hey. All right. Zoom, lovely Zoom.
Zoom for me, I only ever used it for, I had to download it when our orchestra started doing meetings. The only way you'd sign into like an orchestra meeting, and then I had to do an interview for someone recently in a little local radio thing over here. And he said, oh, let's do it on Zoom. I can't get my Zoom to record, so we'll do it on your Zoom and then you can record it. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So we did this interview. And it was a bit like this, where I had it set up and I tested and it was all going to work. And then I had to say, oh, let's use the computer audio, but it still actually uses the microphone audio. Fine. Let's record it. Great. Fine. Then about an hour later, I went back to check the recording. Not there. Nothing. I don't know why. It was definitely recording, not there. So I had to call him back and say, look, I had one job to do as someone that's got himself a recording label. I had to record this conversation for us, and I completely messed it up. It's slightly embarrassing. He's like, no, cool, it's fine. He said that he had to do an interview with the BBC only 2 days before that, and the same thing happened. The woman from the BBC, the local BBC station, also messed up recording a Zoom interview. And she's supposed to know what she's doing because she does it all day, every day. So obviously, I'm just glad I get the time right. I've learned. I used to never know what to do when I did remote podcasts. I was going down the road of trying to do everything live in person, which was fun. Obviously, that's not happening right now. But so and then over the years, I'd suggest Skype, I'd suggest FaceTime, and there are always ways to hack it together, but it's not as integrated. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, everybody and their dog knew about
about Zoom. And so it's become much easier to just suggest it and share. And I've learned always I hope I did this with you, but always like give them the time in their time zone. And Australia, which I know I used to be horrible about Australia because the international date line, I had so many times I'd be like walking to the pub in my neighborhood and I get a message like, are we doing a conversation? Tomorrow. Yeah. But I was in Australia in November last year, and I think spending some time there got me like a little, I haven't screwed up Australia since then, but knock on wood.
When you sent the email through, I was super impressed because you said, right, I'm just going to set up this meeting. Bang, meeting, time, meeting ID. This is what's going to happen. Your time. I'm just like, whoa, this man does this. He knows how to do this sort of stuff. Whereas the guy that did this interview with me, and we were both just like, well, I don't really know how to use a computer with the Zoom and this. And he was like, yeah, I don't really know either. I can't even record my Zoom. But, we kind of baffled our way through it. And we got a thing. But as soon as I saw your email, I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He's on top of this stuff. He does this every week. Yeah.
Well, I'm getting more comfortable in a rhythm of this, and I have total belt and suspenders. I use this program called Audio Hijack Pro to record.
Absolutely. That's what we did the second time. I definitely Audio Hijack Pro.
No, it's great. And I record on Zoom too. The great thing about Audio Hijack Pro is it splits the audio into, so if we have a great connection here and you have great audio, but a lot of the time I have funky connections with people, and I never want to give someone a homework assignment to talk with me. So if it was totally unacceptable, I wouldn't put it out, but I generally try to work with what I got. But if they don't have headphones, my voice might be cutting into their track. And if it's not separated, it's an editing nightmare.
That's why I didn't use the Audio Hijack Pro interview, because when we finished, I said, look, I'm just going to check this. So I had a listen. It was like one in one ear, one in the other ear. I'm like, whoa, well, that's not going to work on radio.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know with that. And then I checked the Zoom one, and of course it was as if we were doing, it was the mono, but it was proper mono, not panned right and panned left.
Yeah.
So, but I can see how, of course, that would, if you're needing to separate out stuff, that'd be perfect. You just be able to.
Yeah, I mean, since we're going deep into the text, I love talking about whatever. But what I do is I use Adobe Audition these days, and I pull that file in, and then I just go in and I separate the stereo track into two mono tracks, and so then I just have like great, and then I level it out and do a little noise. I mean, Adobe Audition is particularly well suited to that. Back in the days, I would like break out Audacity or use a bunch of software that my current Mac OS doesn't even use. So that's my workflow. My preferred workflow, which I can't wait for this to happen again, is just to go somewhere and be like a field reporter and bring my microphones. And I had such a great time in Australia doing that. I was chatting with Ben Robertson, this wonderful jazz bassist out of Melbourne, and we were sitting in the gardens just right across from where the Melbourne Symphony plays. And I connected with Kirsty McCann, who is and it's great because
I know Ben, but I do know Kirsty. She's married to Case.
Yes, who you spent some time with. Was Andy Rossetti in the Sydney Symphony when you were there? Did your paths cross?
I left. Basically, what happened was I was freelancing in Queensland and freelancing in Sydney right at the time where these three jobs, they had three guys, I think. Yeah, three guys basically retire from the section, and so they had these three jobs to fill. And the way it happens in Australia is that they had to have proved that they'd auditioned the jobs three times in Australia first, for Australian citizens first. So I think by the time it got to the third time, they were basically just, they weren't going to take anyone from Australia. It was a formality they wanted to get through, but it was great practice for us. I mean, I'd literally just come out of college. There was no way I was going to land a job in the Sydney Symphony, but it did mean I was down there doing work. And Andy was one of the guys that got the jobs. Actually, they went to three American guys that came over, and it was at that point, that was a bit of a turning point. I'm sorry, this is going to be quite poppy because I never talk into a microphone.
You sound great. Don't worry. Yeah, it's coming through okay on my end.
It was a turning point for me right then, actually, because I realized that these three American guys that came over, they just sounded hot. And I thought, okay, you win an audition, you got to be like that. And we just weren't at that level. In Australia, we learned how to play the bass, and there wasn't much competition. I mean, I didn't grow up with a lot of competition. I don't think anybody that went through my conservatorium in my 4 years, sort of around where I was, bass playing was, I don't think any of them are playing professionally. I might be wrong. I've lost contact with a few people, but I know a lot of them went off and did other things. They just wanted to do other things. They weren't interested in playing so much. It wasn't a, I don't know how to explain it, but I know if you study in America, I mean, you might be in a class of 40 people, and everyone's just kind of vying. The competition pushes the level up. In Australia, we were all mates, and we were having a nice time and learning. And suddenly there was this job in Sydney, great job, beautiful job, and it wasn't until these American guys came over and basically rinsed everything, we all kind of went, "Oh right, okay." Oh yeah, that's another, that we have to be like that. I mean, the typical thing of being able to just do all your excerpts from memory. That was a thing for us. Why would you do them from memory? You can have your music there. It's not the point. It's knowing it so well and having it so ingrained in you. You can play it from memory. You know all the things. You don't have to sit there and read the notes. You're not, it's just, it's another whole nother level that we weren't at, really. I think things have moved on a lot in Australia in those, well, it's 20 something years since I was studying in Australia. So it really has moved on a lot.
It seems like that to me. I was over there for the Melbourne. The Melbourne Bass Day was happening, and Rob Nairn, who is teaching at the University of Melbourne, what invited me over, and I thought, like, any excuse to go to Australia is great. And I think of the 17-hour flight from San Francisco to Australia, which is staggering. But then I talked to people in Europe trying to get to Australia, and you're transferring in the Middle East and that kind of thing. It was so funny though. The weird thing, you get on the plane here in San Francisco. I'm looking at the palm trees. I'm looking at the eucalyptus trees. I'm looking at everything. The Mediterranean coast that we have here. 17 hours later, get off in Sydney. It looks exactly the same. And there was nothing but water between me. The next bit of land I saw was Australia. And it's like so far away, yet so similar. And just, I had such a great time. I realized how desperately I need to get back and take in more of the country. And it's so interesting. Like, it seems like there's a really great scene in terms of bass, both in Melbourne and Sydney, and I'm sure other places. I was talking with Linda O, who is a wonderful jazz artist who is from Perth and actually moved back to Perth recently. She's expecting a child, and she and her husband are there in Perth. And I was talking with her about the scene there. And then I have a friend named Phoebe Russell, who is principal bass of Queensland Symphony at the moment, and just chatting with her. And she's originally from Melbourne, but chatting with her about that. So did you grow up in Queensland?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's weird. I mean, I took up the bass for two reasons. I grew up in a very big church, actually. It was about 1,200, 1,500 people, I guess, something like that. Had a lot of preachers, and my dad was one of them. So for most of my life, I remember my dad being a preacher, and the church was quite a musical church, and they always did a lot of recording of music and stuff, one of those sort of churches. So there were studios and stuff. My dad was very involved in that. And they decided that for their services, they wanted to start getting the kids involved and build up a bit of an orchestra. Oh, sorry, I've knocked the microphone. Build a bit of an orchestra. And they needed a double bass player. And I wanted to play the saxophone. But my dad said, I'll tell you what, if you play the double bass, you can play the bass guitar. Like, cool. That's cool. So to a 13-year-old kid, bass guitar is cool. I can tell you, playing the double bass and the bass guitar is still not as cool as playing the saxophone. I'm sorry, I love it, but I'd still love to be able to play the saxophone. It's such a great instrument. So, I did all of that. I basically learned how to play in the church and learned a lot of stuff by ear. I mean, I was having lessons and stuff, and I started the local youth orchestra. And while I was there in the youth orchestra, I had this kind of an epiphany concert where I was playing Brahms 3. And I suddenly realized on the stage, I went, oh, this is what I want to do. There's something amazing about this. This is great. If I could do this for my job, that'd be amazing. So I kind of researched and worked out, yeah, you can do this for your job. It's a career. So I kind of followed on that way. And my church had, this is kind of a theme in my life. My church had a lot to do with my life all the way through. And they had this thing at the time where they, I guess it was a doctrine, a belief where you're kind of born is where you stay, where God wanted you to be. And that really, it affected my life quite a bit. I turned down a lot of opportunities growing up to go and do things elsewhere because of that. And I think I was going somewhere with all that. I tend to ramble. I'm sorry.
Me too. It's okay.
So yeah, so with the church thing, I ended up, I stayed in Queensland. Basically, I studied in Queensland at the local conservatoire. I lived with my family. It was all the way through till I was like about 21, and then suddenly, I did the Pacific Music Festival. And I suddenly just realized that there were people out there that kind of felt the same way that I did. And it didn't seem to be the same way that a lot of people at my school felt at the time. I just had this burning ambition and this intense burning feeling for music. And it was my complete life. And I just met all these people. Everyone that was at PMF was suddenly like this. I'm like, oh, there are others like me out there. I mean, it sounds like I'm putting down all my colleagues at the music school I grew up in. It's not true. There are obviously people there that were completely deeply into their music, but to suddenly be put into a 3-week or 4-week situation where every single person cares probably more than I did about the music and about what they were doing, it was a massive enlightenment for me. So
yeah, I did the Pacific Music Festival in, I want to say 1998 or 2000. I did it in 2000. I don't know when you did it. So I did it in 99. And they invited me back for 2000, and I turned it down simply because of what I said before about the church. They were a bit, things were saying, sorry, this is my greyhound hitting the microphone. I wish you could see her. No worries.
She's interested. They, for whatever reason, they advised me against going and kind of, I think they could see that I might have been, being dragged away from being in Brisbane and being involved in the church and things. So I ended up, regrettably now, but I ended up not going in 2000. So we would have been there together.
We almost played in the same section. That's crazy.
A great mate of mine went that year, who's a flautist in Chicago, and you probably know him, a guy called Tim Munro. Do you know Tim?
Oh boy, that sounds super familiar.
He was in Eighth Blackbird for a long time. And
I definitely know him through I don't know that I'm sure I would recognize him. And Eighth Blackbird, my paths have crossed with theirs several times in different projects. So that is so cool. What a small world. That festival, that was, I still think that was the most fun I've ever had in a month in my entire life. I've done many music festivals growing up. I mean, not, back in the college years, and some were wild adventures. I did the American Russian Youth Orchestra, which was insane. Wow. And everything from someone pulling a gun on us in Moscow to the army having our bases on the truck in Siberia, like literally, and to swimming in the Volga and the Russians saying many toxins in the Volga. But PMF, that every bit of that experience was first class. I don't even know if that festival's still going on. I haven't looked in recently, but it was incredible for me. This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the advanced music notation software from Steinberg. And one of the coolest things about this piece of software, there's so many things, but one of them is their popover option. And it has sped up things so much for me when I'm working in scores. Here's Senior Product Manager Daniel Spreadbury on how popover mode works.
There's like hundreds of notations that you might want to create, and trying to remember what to type, is it Command Shift Alt, Vulcan Death Grip 7 for this particular notation. But the nice thing about a popover is all you have to remember is the letter of the thing you want to create. So D for dynamics, T for tempo, M for meter, K for key signature.
It might seem like a simple thing, but you would not believe how much that has sped up my workflow. And I'm not even really a composer. I do a lot of arrangements, I do a lot of exercises, but it has taken my workflow probably at least up to 5 times faster. Just that one mode. I can't say enough good things about Dorico. I love it. I use it every single day. There's a free version, Dorico SC, that you can download that lets you do practically everything for up to 2 stabs. So check it out. Dorico.com will take you to their page on Steinberg's website. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by the Practisma Practice Journal. And not only does this journal track your progress throughout 16 weeks, but it encourages you to find joy in your practicing. And here's Susanna Klein, author of Practisma, on the topic.
I don't think I was very good at finding joy in practice until I started working with others to try and create a little joy for them, and then kind of saying, well, why don't I do that too? And the empowerment thing, it's just, these are all kind of related. I mean, if you don't feel empowered, meaning if you don't feel like, not, hey, I'm great, but yes, I'm headed in the right direction. I'm making progress. In the future, things will be good, better.
I'm a big fan of this journal. I've gone through all 16 weeks myself on my own personal journey. It is so cool what Susanna's created. It's packed with research-based strategies to turn your ho-hum practice into extraordinary practice, and it really works. Learn more at Practisma.com, where you can download the introductory chapter of the journal for free. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast.
It's funny. It is such a small world. We must be about the same vintage.
Yeah, I'm 44. I graduated from college. I started college in 94, graduated in 98, did a master's, finished up in 2000. So it sounds like we were kind of in similar spots in life.
I'm
different ones.
42 and a half, I guess. And yeah, finished college in 99, 95 to 99. I just did the 4 years. So just an undergrad. No more than that. The rest of it was University of Life sort of stuff. So,
did you move? So at PMF, did moving to Sydney happen after that, or okay?
Kind of the same time. So that was in my final year. That was 99. That was my final year of college, and a couple of things happened in that year. One was PMF. The second, I came back from that, and we got a new guy that came to the conservatorium in Queensland, who was there simply to conduct. And I soon found out that this guy was an international bass player. We didn't know, but he didn't want anyone to know. He just wanted to get into conducting. That was his thing. This guy called Michael Morgan. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, but if you've had anything to do with Greg Sarche.
Yes, I know Michael Morgan was Greg Sarche. Oh boy, this is a small world indeed. Michael Morgan was Greg Sarche's teacher. And let me see if I'm getting this right. Michael Morgan was principal bassist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, I believe. And Greg Sarche, who is a bassist in the Lyric Opera of Chicago. And actually was one of my first podcast guests, and he and I used to carpool to Lyric in gigs back in Chicago. That's what a small world is. But I remember Greg just singing his praises. So
yeah, Mike had such a career. He was Basel in Europe, and then he was the Metropolitan Opera, and then he was down in Melbourne actually, because his wife was from Brisbane. So he was down in Melbourne for a couple of years, and then he was in Seattle for 10 years, and then she sadly passed, and he decided he wanted to be close to where she was from. So he came to Brisbane. A job came up to conduct the orchestra. So he took that on, and I found out that he was this bass guy. I'm like, right. I got on the phone to him at his hotel. He'd been in the country for 2 days, and somebody gave me the phone number for his hotel. And so I called him up and said, hi, this is me. Can I learn from you, please? He's like, I'm not really teaching. I really bothered him. And eventually he caved. So I spent a year, my final year, learning with him, and he was encouraging me to spread my wings. He saw what had happened with me coming back from Pacific Music Festival. He saw I was suddenly a bit like a different young musician. He's like, okay, you need to start thinking about other things. So I then did the audition in Sydney and some work in Sydney, and all this happened within the space of about a year and a half. And then I suddenly just came home from working at a CD shop one day. I was just earning a bit of extra money. I came home to my parents and said, so I've bought a one-way ticket to Europe. And there was dead silence, and And that was that. About 2 months later, off I doodled to Europe on a one-way ticket. And that was kind of it. The plan was to study in America. So I spent 6 or 7 months in Brussels. I had a friend in Brussels, so we hung out for 6 or 7 months, and I did some auditions because there were no auditions in Australia apart from the Sydney auditions. I thought I could do lots of auditions, get used to doing auditions. I did a lot of practice and drank beer and ate chocolate. If I'd realized how ineffective that practice was, I'd have ditched that and just drunk beer and eaten chocolate and touristy things. It was the sort of practice that people that don't know how to practice do. And only recently I've learned how to practice, I think. And I really enjoyed that podcast you did with Jason Harheim, actually.
Yeah.
I've been really digging on that, really listening to that a lot, because I've come to a lot of this stuff myself just over time, and I hear this guy talking about how he's used a lot of the same ideas. I'm like, yes to all this stuff. Yes, I agree with all this stuff. But it took me 20 years to learn how to do a lot of these things. I'm nowhere near as organized about it as Jason, but all the principles are the same.
Yeah, and folks who are listening, Jason Haheim, go back a few episodes from this one, and you'll find that he's the principal timpist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, but was a scientist and was working as a scientist in Chicago. No musical training, no formal studies, and then got definitely one of the best jobs in the States, possibly in the world for a timpanist. And actually, I have after I realized after about 30 seconds that I could have him on every single day of the week, and we have more to talk about. So we actually have a second one in the can just about education, because and just like, what's the point of music school is kind of that. And I had another conversation with some people along similar lines, and I think it's great, just diverting slightly further, that I'm in a position where I don't have an academic job, and it's safe for me to talk about that stuff. And I think it's just valuable. Not that you should or shouldn't go to music school. I went to music school. You went to music school. I think that it's a good decision. Maybe at what cost is a good question, but I think it's good because if you have a job in academia in any capacity, it's a scary topic, but I think it's something that people should. I think it warrants consideration. So that's cool that you discovered that. The deliberate practice thing. That's a recent discovery for me too. And actually, I got hipped to Jason Haheim by my friend Mark Gelfo, who created an app for deliberate practice called Modacity, and that app, it got me back into practicing the bass back maybe two and a half years ago. I was like prepare for the event and that's it practicer up until a couple of years ago. But you've been getting more into deliberate practice in the last few years.
Yeah, not in those sort of terms. I never knew that it had a title or a name, but just being organized about my practice and organized about the time. And actually, in my mind, I've always called it concentrated practice, because basically my time in London, from when I started actually playing in London, because when I first arrived in London, I didn't play bass for about 2 years, and I did this audition at NEC. I flew from London over to NEC, did this audition. I really wanted to learn with Larry at NEC. Did this audition, got back to London, and he said, yeah, great, we're going to accept you. We've given you a scholarship. Perfect. I had everything lined up in Australia. As long as I got a scholarship, somewhere in Australia would double that and prove, they gave me the money to prove I could have the green card to study. And because the academic years don't match up, I missed out on my funding in Australia. Larry said, we can keep your place, but we can't defer your scholarship. So you'd have to apply again, have to come over and apply again. And it just didn't work. It wasn't ever going to work. And the whole thing basically sunk me for 2 years. I was so disheartened that I went and worked in a record shop in a place called HMV on Oxford Street, which was one of the best bits of music education I had. I worked in the classical department. I got given all these free CDs from reps. I learned so much orchestral repertoire just because I was given all this free music. Yeah, this is before streaming, so everything was still CDs. People were buying CDs. People would walk out with bags and bags and bags of classical CDs. So I did that for 2 years, And then once I started to later on, I'm skipping around a bit, but later on when I got very, very busy, but still didn't have a job, I knew I had to get better and smarter with my practice, not just sit there all afternoon when I wasn't working and just kind of playing along on Bottesini or Kusavisky or one of the concertos. As nice as that was, I was just practicing mistakes. So I had to get really smart about practice, and I had to get the higher profile freelance work I got. I realized I might have like only an hour to learn all the rep for the tomorrow's rehearsal with, say, the Philharmonia or something. And I had to be on top of that. So I had to find some way of an hour learning a symphony I didn't know. Maybe it was Shostakovich 12 or something I didn't know. I'm just like, right, I have to work out how to learn all this stuff enough to get me through that rehearsal tomorrow. Because in these London bands, when you go in and do a rehearsal, you do a concert, you'll do something like, you might get a quick rehearsal on Monday, might be a 3-hour rehearsal. Often not. What you'll get is a morning and afternoon rehearsal on Tuesday. Wednesday's the dress rehearsal. Thursday, and Wednesday night's the concert. Wednesday afternoon's the concert. You know, it's literally because of money. So when you spend a lot of time in bands like that, as I was very fortunate to do, a lot of these London bands, you learn rep really quick, and you learn how to read it really quick. You learn that basically that first rehearsal, when you listen to the first rehearsal of somewhere like Philharmonia or LSO or LPO, a lot of people, that first rehearsal, a lot of conductors, young conductors come in, they're just like, oh, we could just go and do a concert right now, because these people just read. They're monsters at reading. It's unbelievable. And they, not just the notes, I mean, they're reading everything, and they're remembering, because they've just built up a phenomenal, massive rep. So, you know, I had to be able to match that. If I wanted to keep doing work with these orchestras, you have to be able to turn up on the first day really prepared, because I didn't have the experience of 30 years of playing this rep anyway. So I had to learn how to do that. And I might only have an hour to do it, maybe before the rehearsal.
Yeah, and that's such a different set of folks who might not know the orchestral world. That might more, at least here in the States, than like when I sub with the San Francisco Symphony. Typically, it's 4 rehearsals and then some number of concerts, generally 3, and it's usually one, like a 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Wednesday has a double. Thursday's the dress rehearsal. Friday's the first performance. So 3 rehearsals, and the concert might not seem that different to you, but what that means is that you start rehearsing, and the next evening you're playing that concert, and that might not seem like that big a difference, but living with the music as an ensemble, there's just such a different experience. So that's really interesting. That I've experienced that a little bit in some ensembles here, but generally the setup here in the States, at least, is that 4 rehearsal setup. What's the City of Birmingham Symphony schedule like? Is that or just generally throughout the UK? Is that a common structure? Or is that really London?
It's a London thing, because so my job at CBSO, it's salaried, which means that you have the luxury of the bit of extra time, and I think they get the balance about right. It's about what you were talking then. So we might do, say, a half a day on Monday, Tuesday be a full day, Wednesday be a dress rehearsal and a concert, or maybe it'll be Thursday. There's a dress rehearsal and a concert. I've done a lot of work in places like Norway and down in Tenerife and stuff, where you do basically 4 days of rehearsal before you hit a concert, and it's too much, because by the time you get to that concert, you should have done it a day before. It starts to get tired. You know, I mean, London can be a bit extreme, a bit crazy. There are, depending on the situation and how high profile the concert is, not one of their major concerts at, say, the South Bank Centre or Barbican, but certainly I've done gigs in all these orchestras where it's literally you rock up in the morning, do a rehearsal, and then concert that afternoon or concert that night, or an afternoon rehearsal and a concert. That's it. You get 1 3-hour call to learn the stuff. It's all rep, so it'll be Tchaik 5 or Sibelius 5 or, you know, Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2. It'll be all rep, but it's literally, it's a chance for the conductor to come in and try and put his stamp on it. And we used to always laugh with things like this. So somebody might come in and try and do Tchaik 5 on one of these things. It'll be a young conductor. And unless they're particularly strong personalities and can really, control an orchestra, what they get is the Philharmonia's Chike 5. They happen to be, because these orchestras can literally play like most professional ensembles, but they don't have to. But these orchestras can literally play with no conductor at the front. They'll bang out a Chike 5 and it will sound great because everyone just does this, heads down, bang, it'll happen. So if whoever's at the front isn't really showing enough direction or this, then you can see everyone just kind of go, right, they're getting our Chike 5 tonight. This is what's going to happen. It's almost like this complicit agreement amongst everyone. Okay, let's just call time on this, and we'll it's almost like a safety mechanism. We need to preserve the way this orchestra sounds, because if we all try and follow this, it's not going to work. And that's horrible, but it's kind of the way it works sometimes in London.
I hear you 100%. How long does the conductor have in the London freelance? Like, do you know within 30 seconds whether you're going to have to kick in the safety mechanism, or is it? This might be an impossible question, but like I've certainly done my not the same scene certainly, but freelancing in Chicago for many years. There were times where you're like, okay, this is happening, and we're watching the concertmaster, and we know what to do, and we know those. So how long, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is a bit like how long's a piece of string. I mean, it's tricky. Sometimes it's obvious. Okay, this is not going to happen, and you get, for want of a better term, you get repeat offenders, people that are have had wonderful careers as soloists, for example. Some amazing soloists come in, and they're such amazing musicians. But this, and I'm waving my hands here in front of a microphone, nobody can hear me. This is not there. The stick technique's not there for whatever reason. But they can kind of communicate. So you're taking the musical, some sort of musical communication from them, but not looking at them at all.
Yeah. Right.
And those sort of concerts can be quite electric, because even though they're almost distracting to watch conductor-wise, they keep getting asked back because the concert's been so electric. So the general manager will like go, well, that was a great concert. We're getting that conductor back again. And everyone's like, okay, it's this guy again. Whatever you do, just don't watch him or don't watch her. You just must not watch. Do not play when this. I mean, I've had principals from some of these orchestras turn and go, okay, please, whatever we do, don't play on this person's beat. Just it's a no. Just everyone just stick with me and we'll be okay.
After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66. Yes, that's a lot. Video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble-bass.com/Jason Heath. My practicing companion, Modacity, this awesome app, it is so great for getting you to really think about your practicing. And there's what's called a deliberate practice mode. It tracks everything that you are improving upon and time spent in every piece. And it's just so great. Here is founder and CEO of Modacity, Mark Gelfo, on what the app does.
I use the deliberate practice feature in Modacity a ton. So what I'm logging my improvements. I improved my articulation today by using this strategy. And then I see that in my log. So I see all the improvements that I made, the strategy that led to that improvement. I see the star rating as well as the time spent.
It is so satisfying to be able to look back on your history like Mark's describing. I do that all the time, and it keeps me inspired and energized and feeling like I'm really making progress. Learn more at modacity.co. And if you visit our site, we've got a special offer for lifetime access for this app. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity. Yeah, it's so interesting to me, that whole the conductor mystique, or whatever we want to call it. It's such a funky thing, and then the conductor working with seasoned professionals and a band, and it's generally my experience has been like nobody likes anybody. You're never going to get a consensus, but a lot of the time there are some people. I remember Pierre Boulez was one where like generally people are like, oh yes, Todd Koopman. Oh, am I screwing up his name? Am I getting that? Okay. I was playing a week with San Francisco. We were doing some lighter rep. I'm forgetting what the program was, but they loved him and they were so excited. And it was one of those, the principal bass, Scott Pingle, who, did I do PMF with him? I can't remember. But anyway, he was talking about how that was one of his favorite weeks of the year. And program wise, I mean, it was fine. They did Nielsen 5 a few weeks later, which maybe would be more memorable, maybe for different reasons. Nielsen 5 is notoriously difficult if you're not in the orchestra world here. But it's so interesting. I think some conductors who struggle with, sometimes less gifted or competent conductors, they don't realize what strange power they wield with their body movement. I remember talking to Kate Nettleman, who's a bassist now. She's assistant principal in the Minnesota Orchestra, was principal for Hong Kong for a few years, and we played in a freelance orchestra in Chicago that the conductor he got in the way, and part of it was we just couldn't trust his gestures and just the power you can have, and it's really tough, like you were describing, if there's music in that person and there's potential in that person, but they get in there, they're just unable to physically communicate that.
Yeah, it's almost worse if they can physically communicate it, because as you say, they can really lead you up a garden path. If there's a conductor that's got great conviction about something, but it's not really right somehow, that's even harder. If there's someone that's basically just being quite vague but very musical, and I'm being very careful not to give any names. I'm thinking of particular people, particular conductors that are unbelievably musical but super vague, and you can just go, okay, well, there's nothing really there to have to latch onto. But there are some conductors that are really clear about what they want, but if you play with them, it's not actually what they want. And I don't think they realize that what they're showing is what, if you do play with them, then they're not going to get what they're asking for. That makes sense, but they're giving it with such conviction, and it's fine until it happens in the concert, and they give you a massive big sort of indicator, and someone goes with it. Someone's just like, oh, I must go with that. Oh, no, whatever you do, just the plan was to just keep your head down and go with the principal bass. Let's go with the principal bass,
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I feel we're very fortunate here in San Francisco. Whenever concerts resume, Esa-Pekka Salonen is the new music director for San Francisco Symphony. Everybody's super, super excited about that, for sure.
I mean, I spent so many years. We were talking before about I didn't really have anything more than an undergrad degree, and you were saying you had a conversation with Jason about music schools and education, and I never got round to do anything more than the undergrad degree, because I didn't do any further study in the UK, and in the end, because of how things worked out, my education was sitting in orchestras and learning from my colleagues around me, learning from these amazing conductors and amazing soloists that came in. And I think I probably have learned more from Esa-Pekka Salonen than any conductor, because I spent so many rehearsals with him in the Philharmonia, just absorbing what he's a. Yeah, I can't even think of a word for it. But you guys are so lucky. He's going to be wonderful. He's going to be so wonderful.
It's hard to put that into words for sure. His gestures, there's a unique quality, the way he conveys things physically. Speaking of that, my wife is now a radiologist, but was a freelance harpist and would sub in the Chicago Symphony. And Esa-Pekka was conducting a week that she was subbing, and she just remarked on that. And it's been really fun. When he was announced as music director, he came and did a couple concerts, and I remember seeing some. It was I was exhausted just watching the concert. I think it was a Strauss tone poem and then some extremely long Sibelius thing I'd never heard of that was many, many movements. And I was just watching those people and sweating. Just
it would have been on Saga, N Saga. I think probably
maybe, yeah.
maybe is the other thing he loves doing.
Yeah. You know, the other thing you mentioned I think is so interesting is the record store. Working in the record store. A great friend of mine, Scott Best, he's principal bass of the Memphis Symphony here, originally from Boston, speaking of Boston earlier, and he worked at Tower Records in Boston. And I've been stand partners with him on and off in a chamber orchestra for 20 plus years. And he brings up that record store so frequently as an education, very similar to what you're talking about. And boy, do I miss, I mean, I love that I have this, the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, my phone sitting here on the table with me, being able to, at the drop of a hat, just look up anything, video or audio. And I mean, it's incredible, compare how many different orchestra performances or whatever genre you're talking about. But I remember those days, like going to Tower Records and actually having to plunk down cash and choose, oh, do I want the Chicago Symphony? Do I want Berlin Philharmonic playing Beethoven? And then I would take that home and I'd open up the liner notes and going. There's an education in that too that is much fuzzier, I think, in the current moments.
We take it for granted now. I mean, the students that I talk to now, I do a little bit of coaching of chamber music at the Birmingham Conservatoire. So I talk to students a little bit, or they'll come and find me after a concert, and we'll have a bit of a chat. And you know, we talk about rep, and they always. The thing that's interesting is that it's so instant for them, and they take it for granted. You know, I had to build up my CD collection, as you say, by putting down hard cash. And when you're having to build it up, you go and if I wanted to buy a Mahler 5 when I was a student, I go to the local CD shop and I'd go and listen to three or four Mahler 5s to decide what I wanted. And then I might plonk on one, I'd get settled on one. Mm-hmm. And then 3-4 months later, I'm a bit like, I really liked the sound of that Chicago one. I've got a choice. I can not really eat lunch for 2 days and take that money and go and buy that CD. I'll make a sandwich from home. I'll take that in instead of buying lunch. And I used to do that, you know, and I was speaking with my wife. I think, yeah, a lot of guys kind of, you know, drink beer all through university. My vice was buying CDs. Really into beer when I was in university. I don't know, for some reason I just didn't get into it, but my vice was buying CDs, and I just collected CDs. So actually, when I got to London and worked in the CD shop, it was a great job. It was better than working behind a bar or anything like that, because it was kind of like me working behind my bar, behind, you know, me working with my vice. Mm-hmm. I've got a very funny story actually to tell you from if you've got time.
I have plenty of time. Yeah,
where as I was working in the CD shop, right at the end of my CD shop days, and I was very lucky because I was something called I can't remember what my job title was. It was something to do with sorting out all of the sales stuff. And above me, I had 2 or 3 bosses, as it works, and each one of them was a double bass player, bizarrely, you know, and so that's the way it worked out. They didn't know I was a bass player until I started working in the shop. They weren't the ones that hired me. So we talked a lot about double bass stuff, and they were very supportive of when I started to do lessons. And I somehow, some sort of miraculous fluke, I landed a trial for a job with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra while I was working at the CD shop. I somehow practiced enough and impressed enough in the audition that I got a trial. And we can talk about trial system later on. I don't know if you know much about the UK trial system for orchestras, but there were 5 of us on trial for a job. And this trial went on for, you know, a year or 2 years. So in that time at the CD shop, in the last sort of 6 months to 8 months of that, it got to the point where I could keep my full-time employment as long as I worked for 4 days in a month. I could work as many days as they wanted, as I wanted, sorry, and they'd pay me. As long as I worked for 4 days a month, I could keep me on a full-time contract. So, you know, they really looked after me. They let me keep a job, and anytime I had spare days, I could just show up. I didn't have to tell them I was coming in. I'd just show up, and they'd just mark me down as I was working that day, you know. So, you know, in a way, they looked after me. They allowed me to get back into the orchestral playing. But part of my trial on one of these was to play the last outdoor concert of Pavarotti, and it was kind of my last bit of trial. They threw me a bone and said, okay, we want you to lead the bass section for this. There weren't very many members on. Nobody really wanted to do it. So they said, go on, you young Jeremy, you go and lead the bass section for this concert with Pavarotti. Fine, great, lovely. This big outdoor gig in front of a thing called Leeds Castle, which is not in Leeds, it's miles from Leeds, but it's in Kent, which is the other end of the country.
That's funny.
So anyway, so it was a Friday night, a Saturday night. I played this concert. Lovely. Sunday morning came round, and I used to do Sundays a lot. I was in there, only member of staff in the classical music department, and this old couple came up with, I don't know, about 10 Pavarotti CDs, plonked them on the counter. And I said, did you go to the concert last night at Leeds Castle? And they're like, oh, yes. Oh, it was really wonderful. It was a very exclusive concert, very expensive tickets. Oh, we were in the third row. It was lovely. Great. I said, I was playing in that. Like, so, no, this is the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I'm like, yes, no, I was playing, I'm on trial with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. I was playing principal bass for that. And they just said, no, you weren't. I'm like, no, I was. I know I'm here, in my HMV t-shirt selling you CDs for Pavarotti now, but I was there. I was playing principal bass for that. No, you weren't. Again, and there was no convincing them that someone that was in, or was, to all intents and purposes for their eyes, was in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, that amazing concert that they paid a lot of money for, was selling them CDs the very next morning. And it kind of struck me how the irony of it, the strangeness of it for them as well. I mean, it must have been even slightly offensive. It's like, hang on, this young kid is here selling me CDs. There's no way he was up. There's no way we paid a lot of money to see him play with this superstar over here,
Yeah, it's so interesting how people misunderstand the profession, and I played for years and years in this group, the Elgin Symphony, just outside of Chicago, per service group. Is that the term that you use in the UK?
We don't, but that's basically what most of the London orchestras are. Very few of them are salaried, so they are all
and
service.
I would love to talk to you about that, because I've chatted with astonishingly few people. It's my fault that have worked in that world in London. That's a world that's quite familiar to me and a lot of people that have done the sort of work I'm doing. But I remember Elgin Symphony, we would have these after concert soirees, and just trying to explain what I did, what other people did. I mean, and it was all very friendly, but there's just a misunderstanding, or even all those years in Chicago. Oh, you play bass? You play in the Chicago Symphony? No. Oh, what do you do? Oh, you make your living doing this? How do you do that? And it is confusing. I mean, it's confusing to me. But what is that scene? Yeah, can you describe like the kind of work you did and how how London freelancers, do you call them? Is freelancer the term that they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting. So a freelancer is essentially anyone that isn't a member somewhere. Mm-hmm. Now, there are the salaried orchestras in London. So you've got the BBC Symphony, the BBC Concert Orchestra. Mm-hmm. The smaller one does a lot more crossover stuff and was originally set up to do a lot of radio shows. The two opera houses, so English National Opera and Covent Garden, they're all salaried. All the other big orchestras that you can think of are what you would refer to in the United States as a per-service orchestra. So mm-hmm. London Symphony Orchestra, Philharmonia Orchestra, London Philharmonic Orchestra, Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, I think even the Academy St. in the Fields. And then there's the smaller ones, London Sinfonietta, English Chamber Orchestra, all these others. They're all what you would call per-service orchestras. But you are a member, so you become a member of one of these orchestras. So if you do an audition and you become a member, what it basically entitles you to is the first call on that work. And in each of the orchestras is slightly different because they're all self-governing, basically. So in a weird way, the orchestra appoints someone like the orchestra manager, but then the orchestra manager is basically still kind of bossing them about, telling them to do this and do that. And it's a weird situation, but if they get really annoyed, they can all get together and go, we need to find a new orchestra manager.
Okay, sure.
It doesn't happen. There are a lot of contradictions in the whole London orchestra scene like that. So it can be hard if someone like the Royal Philharmonic, if there's suddenly no work in the books, well, they don't get paid very much. They're on no sort of guaranteed salary. And which is why London orchestras tend to be, one, good sight readers, as we talked about before, because you've got to get a concert done with the least amount of rehearsal, so that the players aren't getting paid too much for, it's the concerts that really pay the money.
Right.
So the rehearsals, you need to get the bang for buck, basically. They also tend to be good for touring because they'll need to make themselves as cheap as possible to beat everyone else. Really, is a commercial world, orchestral touring. So in Europe, you'll see a lot of British orchestras because they're a bit cheaper to get in than a lot of other orchestras. But then they've also built up a reputation over time, and because they've hung on to their individual sounds as well, through the trial system, which we can talk about in a minute. Rather than all sounding exactly the same, an orchestra is an orchestra, an orchestra, each of these London orchestras sound completely different. So that's kind of the scene. So you're either a salaried player in one of the orchestras I talked about first, or you're a member of one of these other orchestras. And if you're not either of those, but you still work in the scene, you're a freelancer, basically, which is what I was. I wasn't ever a member anywhere, but I got to the point where before I moved to the Midlands, I split my time pretty evenly between Philharmonia and the LSO, a little bit of the LPO, and a little bit of the BBC Concert Orchestra. And that was such an enviable position. And it all kind of changed. I promised myself when I first started freelancing, I promised myself that if I didn't have a job by the time I was 30, that was almost my goal. Because I grew up in Australia where if you don't get a job, the mentality is if you don't get a job, then you failed. You know, if you're a freelancer, then basically you're someone that failed at getting a job. And that damaged me, that whole mentality, and it still exists. It still exists in Australia. Basically, I was a persona non grata. I couldn't say, I didn't have anything to tell, like my university alumni association or my youth orchestra or the Australian youth orchestra, and anyone. I couldn't say, hey, look, I've worked with all these great orchestras. Oh, are you a member of? No, I'm not a member. I'm a freelancer. Oh, then you're a failure. Almost. I mean, it's not said quite like that, but that's basically it. There's this kind of feeling, and it's not like that in London. The London orchestras rely so heavily on the freelance situation. Many of them have depleted sections for whatever reason, sometimes deliberately, sometimes just because they don't have the money to fill the jobs. But it really does rely heavily on the freelance scene, and you can be a very busy freelancer. So those last few years, like my son was born in 2015, and in that year, in his first year, I estimate I was away from the home for more than a third of that year.
Wow.
On tour or on the road, because places like the Philharmonia do a lot of regional concerts. So you might have to drive to Leicester, which is sort of 2.5 hours away, or Bedford, which is an hour and a half away, or Canterbury, which is 2 hours away, or Basingstoke, which is another 3 hours away. And each week you might do one or two of those as well as your stuff. So, I mightn't be around a lot, even when I was around, but I was just away on tour a lot, because the first thing that comes in when they book freelancers, big orchestras book freelancers, they go, right, we've got a tour to Asia coming up, and then we've got a tour to Australia, and then someone else will go, yeah, we've got a tour to the States. And then, so my diary a year in advance would be a mass of tours, and then I would fit my other London freelancing work in around the tours with the big orchestras as well. But most of the time we spend away on tour, because while you're away, you're not spending money.
Yeah.
You're given some per diems to live on. You live on those. And it's good money because you're getting paid for every single day that you're away, whether you're playing or not. It's great money. That might be 4 weeks worth of guaranteed income. So you take those tours as much as you can. And I became so unbelievably busy that when I was on trial for the CBSO, I remember speaking with the principal, who is a guy called Tony Alcock, and he's been a principal at the RPO and lots of the UK orchestras, but he really knew the London scene. And I said to him, look, is it busy up here in Birmingham? He said, look, you're used to working in the London scene. This is nothing like that. This is a nice situation. This is lovely. This is like a normal job. You will see your family. You'll get holiday pay. You'll get time off. You'll get a salary. You'll get a schedule. As a freelancer, you're not used to having a schedule. You can't plan your life. You can't plan holidays and stuff. So he said, if this works out for you up here on this trial, it would be lovely. And as it turns out, it did work out for me. It worked out really nicely, because here we are in this ridiculous pandemic.
Yeah.
So many of my colleagues in London, because the orchestras aren't working, are in real trouble. They're in all sorts of trouble. And I'm on a salaried job that has government assistance because it's a salaried job. And so we're not on our full salary, but I'm not going to be having to get out of the profession. And there's going to be a lot of musicians that aren't going to survive this. They're going to have to go do other things.
Yeah, it's deeply troubling everywhere in the world. It's heartening to hear. I've spoken with a few people in Europe in various areas. I was chatting with a former student who's principal bass of the Westphalian Symphony in Germany, and they've managed the pandemic. So there's nothing going on here in California or the States, really. So it's deeply troubling. And the bond between players and ensemble must be a bit looser in the freelance arrangement versus like the city of Birmingham or something where you have a salaried job. So it's got to be. I'm imagining that the one job, instead of patching things together, has got to be great, especially with a family, and not being on the road. But there's the chaos of the road and like the craziness of it. And I sort of I sort of enjoy that roller coaster chaos in a way that sort of appeals to my personality. I've had times in my life when I've been on salary. I've had times like now where I'm a free spirit doing whatever. But where did you enjoy those tours? I mean, you're describing like what I think of as like a jazz musician's life, like traveling all over the world. And yeah,
I loved it. I remember I said before, I promised myself at 30, if I didn't have a job by 30, I was going to quit music. I always put a little caveat in and said, unless I really start enjoying it, because I wasn't enjoying it from 25 to 30. I was slogging it out, getting trials, but not getting the job. And I was just sick of it. And then at about the age of 30, a couple of things happened. I got a new bass. Suddenly, thankfully, I end up with an old London bass. So I'm so unbelievably fortunate. I bought this thing as an unnamed English thing, and I thought it's kind of cool. It's a good bass. Turned out to be an old John Lott Senior. So I've got this gorgeous old London bass. Now, the orchestras over here, the bass sections are still full of old London type basses, Kennedys, Fents, Lotts, Betts, all these basses. So suddenly I had gone from playing on a French bass, which was gorgeous, but almost impossible to get to blend with sections. Suddenly I was playing on a bass that blended with sections. Because it looked like I was playing the right sort of bass, and because I was blending, my employability skyrocketed. So suddenly I was busy, and I was working with all these great orchestras and these great conductors and soloists, and I was having that, like as you say, like the jazz player, the rock and roll lifestyle of touring everywhere. And I love it. I loved it. And it gets to the point though where you start to do that same tour again and again and again, and you're sitting down having a curry and a beer somewhere out in the middle of China. I've done this exact thing, or I know I have. You start to feel a bit of deja vu. So it was great to have a break. And when I took the job at CBSO, I thought this is perfect. This is what I've wanted the whole time, was to have this. And I've had the job now for just over 2 years. And, the first 6 months were just like, amazing. We had a second child. We bought a new house, a new job. All these wonderful things are happening. And then suddenly I had a horrible time. And I I got really angsty and really angry with myself that I wasn't enjoying. I'm like, it's not right. This is what you've been after this whole time, and people would kill to have the job you've got now. Why aren't you enjoying it? What's wrong with you? And that was a bit of a cycle. I got pretty angry with myself. And of course you get angry with yourself and it spills out, and then other people are like, oh, what's wrong with him? There's something going wrong with this guy. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm missing London. So I did some work in London, but that only made me remember all the fun times I had when I was in London. Then I'd come back and I was even worse at my job. I suddenly became really not very happy with my job. And I think it's simply because I hadn't dealt with kind of just moving on, just going, okay, this is now a job. This is a wonderful opportunity. And what you left London for a reason. You left all that fun for a reason. Remember what that reason was. And that's all it really needed was for me just to remember how much of a slog it was, because I've got a young family. And that's actually the most important thing to me now is actually having the time with my family. And it was interesting because Birmingham's actually celebrating its 100th birthday right now. And literally, we've just done a concert about it. And this season and next season, we're going to be just tour. And my wife's just like, you've just gotten this job that's going to be no touring. Why am I seeing lots of touring? What's going on? Hey, you're away for 4 weeks. You're away for 3 weeks. You're away for 5 weeks. What's all this about? And I was like, it'll just be for a couple of years and then it'll calm down. And then the pandemic happened. No touring. And I'm suddenly here with my family. I'm doing all this stuff with my family. And I don't miss any of it now. I don't miss touring. You were saying you thought that there must be a like a greater sense of greater collegial sense or a greater bond in an orchestra like a CBSO. Bizarrely, and I'm great friends with all my CBSO people, but I think there's actually a greater bond. I have a greater bond with my people in London because we toured together so much. You spend a lot of time together on airplanes in different countries, eating, drinking, telling stories, becoming friends. My job here in CBSO really is it's a job. It's more of like an office job. You turn up, you have a great time, you play some wonderful rep. I've done maybe 2 tours, maybe 3 tours, and they're fun, but they're people. We're not touring like our life depends on it. Like we have to impress every single person. It's like we're going out there and we're going to have a nice concert. It's going to be a great concert. And there's something about the intensity of playing in a London band where every time you go on stage, it's terrifying. And it is terrifying. If it's not terrifying, then something's gone wrong. I mean, yeah, I've had some moments on London band stages on tour and everywhere where I've just been absolutely terrified, petrified, and loving every second of it. But it's like that all the time. It's an adrenaline junkie's dream. People that love adrenaline love playing in that situation. My orchestra, they don't like that. There are a couple of times where we've had to do concerts where they don't get enough rehearsal and it's a really tricky rep. Everyone comes off the stage and everyone's exhausted and they all hate it. And I'm buzzing. I'm like, yes, that's what it's supposed to be. It was amazing. Everyone was terrified and you could smell the adrenaline. And wasn't that a great concert? Everyone was like, no. Next time this piece comes up, we have to have another full day's worth of rehearsal. And it's just a different vibe. And it's taken me a little while to get used to it. But where I am at the moment, that's where I need to be. It's a really good thing. It's just taken a while to accept that, if that makes sense.
Well, getting out of the bit, you're reminding me a bit of my move out here to the West Coast to San Francisco from Chicago, which is in the Midwest of the U.S., but really has more of an East Coast kind of energy. And I came out here and I thought, what the heck is going on? Nobody calls you back. They're surfing or they're at their yoga or meditation retreat or whatever. And then I've been here 5 years, and now this place feels super fast paced to me. And I think like, whoa! I moved here and I saw people wearing these these down coats in the winter. And I thought, you fools, it's like barely, I can walk around in shorts in the winter, and you can. But over the years, I've gotten soft, and I bought one of those puffer coats last year. I thought, this is so cold, it's unacceptable. I got to get a coat. I thought, I will never complain about the weather, because the worst it does here is rain a little bit. And now I'm complaining about the rain just like everybody. So it's interesting how you can adapt. And now when I go back to Chicago, it feels very fast paced. Or certainly when I visit New York City, it feels extremely. And I enjoy that. But it's interesting how one can adapt, or how a group, maybe that's the vibe, has just sort of grown accustomed to that.
Yeah, it's the culture of that orchestra, and it's something I need to embrace more. And actually having the pandemic in a way was really great for me. It almost like kind of interrupted my train of thought about it all, and I've been able to sit down and just go, oh, have a deep breath. What's been going on these last 6 months or 8 months? Why haven't I been enjoying it? Right. And it's almost like I've been able to exhale and go, yeah. And I cannot wait to get back and basically just get on with it. Have a great time, have a really nice time in my orchestra, because we're very lucky. We have such a great chief conductor. She's like super high energy. I don't know if you've ever seen any YouTube clips of her or anything, but she's like mega gražinita tila. Now it takes a couple of weeks to learn how to say that, but it's yeah, she's super high energy. You come into a rehearsal in the morning, especially on tours. These can be tricky on tours, and you're a bit like, I'm just gonna sit here with my cup of coffee. I just whatever. She has to be nice and quiet this morning. She's like, good morning, everyone, all together. She's like, wow. And that intensity happens for 3 hours, then lunch, and then another 3 hours. And she's high energy all the time, and it's infectious.
Yeah.
And it's rare to have something that high energy and that infectious,
Yeah, that's that mystery of the conductor, that wacky electricity. I can't wait for. I'll never take a rehearsal for granted again. All the things that I didn't even think twice about back in February that I was doing. I want to make sure we talk about your pandemic project, because I was just on a Zoom call actually yesterday with three other bass players here in San Francisco, and they were in various states of bemoaning like the fact that there's nothing to do. They're like, what should I practice? What do I do? And it's interesting. And I think in your situation, when you have so little time with childcare and the like, I think it's really inspiring. I've been working on my own pandemic projects and trying to keep motivated with something. But can you talk about that project?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, the bizarre thing is I'm one of these people that starts projects. I'm a habitual project starter, and drives my life insane. I have at various times. I've started an orchestra with three friends of mine. It's kind of a bit defunct. I started a chamber music collective where we play chamber music in pubs. I started painting stuff. I started, all these art projects. I'm building a double bass at the moment. Wow. I'm restoring another double bass at the moment. Building the double bass is 5.5 years worth. Literally, we put it together as a box yesterday. It got glued together as a box. So it is happening. But these projects, I was going to make shirts for a while. That was one of my projects. All my mates at the Philharmonia always laugh when they hear I'm doing another project. I'm writing a children's book, for goodness sake. I'm losing track of the projects that I'm currently doing. They're all at some state of being finished, and I'm deeply passionate about all of them. The irony is that this one that I've completed, it wasn't even a project. It just kind of happened. So my wife works full time. She worked all the way through pandemic. She normally works in London, but she worked from home, but she's constantly on meetings all day. My mother-in-law, who often came round to help out when I was doing orchestra stuff and my wife was in London, couldn't come round. Nobody could come into the house. So it was just me for 5 odd months being dad. And my wife's like, this is perfect for you. We moved up here so you could be with your kids. Here you go. This is going to be great. First week, great. This is wonderful. Had some stuff from my son's nursery. We can do this. And the little girl wasn't too much trouble. She was only a bit over a year. So she was just kind of toddling about and stuff. And I could fix most things with some apple, give her some apple. And then after about a week or 2 weeks, I needed some time to myself. You know, I love my kids, but I'd never had so much time with my kids before. And I was like, oh my God, I need some time to myself. So I said to my wife, can you find an hour somewhere in your day that you can just write off and give to me? I need to be playing music. I need to do something. I feel like suddenly I'm not a musician anymore. I'm suddenly a child mind, even though they're my own children. I'm dad, but I'm not enjoying this, and I want to be enjoying it. I just need a little pressure release every single day. I just need something. Yeah, sure, I can do that. Yeah, you can have an hour here. So for 4 days a week, I got an hour. And in that hour, for the first week, I went upstairs and I'd be like, right, okay, here's my chance to fix my vibrato, my intonation, my this and my that. And I sat there and studiously practiced, and I got to the end of that first week and I was like, that sucks. That's horrible. I'm not doing months of that. There's nothing in that for me. I'm obviously, it's like eating your vegetables. I'm obviously getting good things out of it, but I'm getting nothing. I'm not enjoying it. Right. I need to feel like I'm playing in something. Why don't I'll just get out like a little recorder, and I'll record myself playing some quartets together. Great. So I found the Brumby quartet I knew. Played it in college. Had played it with Brumby, in fact, not with him, but him in the room. So I thought, this is a nice thing to play. So I played this Colin Brumby quartet. And I thought, I've got these nice microphones upstairs from my parents. They used to run a pro audio shop. After my dad was a preacher, he ran a pro audio shop. Of course, he was a civil engineer before he was a preacher, and now he builds websites. That's a whole nother podcast about what your father does for a living, But over the years, they'd given me all these microphones and all these great bits of audio equipment. I thought, okay, I finally got time to use it. I'll learn how to use it. So I started to record myself. And the plan was to do something fun, record these 4 parts, and then do a video of me dressed up in different outfits playing this Colin Brumby, and it all being quite funny and stuff. And 2 things happened. The first thing happened was that suddenly everyone was doing that. I'm like, oh God, that was my idea. I just wasn't quick enough to get onto it. And the second thing that happened was actually, as I listened back to the music and I started to refine it and got better and better, I thought, actually, it deserves more than that. It's really beautiful piece of music. And this recording's sounding pretty good. If I go and buy a little bit more equipment and a couple of plugins are better, can make the sound a bit more like this, and go and redo this bit and that bit. And I mean, there'd be days where I would get 1 bar done. By necessity, I had 40 minutes. So 10 minutes setup, 10 minutes pack up, 40 minutes where I could play. And out of that, you might actually get 6 minutes worth of playing done.
Right.
And so it's obviously not, it's literally stitched together. Some of it is stitched together bar by bar, because that's all the time I had. Whereas others, as the lockdown went on, the last movement, for example, it doesn't work if you stitch together bar by bar, because there's such long phrases that it just sounded like a jigsaw.
Yeah, right.
So when I got a bit more time, I'm like, I need a whole day. So the last movement was basically recorded in 1 day, all exactly the same mic setup, all like, right, bang, bang, bang. I just shut everything off for 1 day just so it was all exactly the same sound and unified. And I'd played it. I'd scrapped 2 versions of it previously, so I was on top of the part. I could just bang it out and make sure it was fine. But so I got to the end. I thought, well, this is a nice sounding thing. What do I do with this? Well, there's no video that goes with it, so none of my friends want to hear it. They're not going to sit down and listen to it. I just thought, you know what? I really want to release this. And I thought to myself, no one's going to release this. I can't take this to a CD company. I looked at making physical copies of it. Well, that's really expensive, actually. And who's going to want to buy a physical copy of a CD anymore? You go to a record company and say, okay, look, I recorded this thing. It's a double bass quartet, but it's all me. I did all the parts. And it's a double bass quartet. Did I mention it's 4 double bass? Door shuts. No one wants to release that. Not even the really minor labels. Record labels have to make money. That's the point. They're a business. So I thought, what if I released it myself? I've seen a bit about these things like TuneCore and was it CD Baby maybe, or Discogs, CD Disc. I can't even remember most of them. But I found one in Glasgow that not specialized, but did a lot of classical music releases. So there was a way of me releasing this on all the big major platforms through them. but I had to have a label to do it. Basically, they said, "Oh, so what label's it released under?" Jeremy, what? No, that's the artist. We need a label. Oh, I'll call you back. I went away and I made up a label. I made a label and I made a website and I did all the other paperwork required to have a label. Now I've got this thing. Maybe other people would want to release on this because it saves them the whole thing of having to do it themselves. If they knew, I mean, this thing was recorded in my bedroom, not my bedroom, actually my daughter's bedroom, our spare room. And I would never have thought of doing it. I thought of recording stuff in the past. I thought, well, who's going to release it? Well, now I'll release it. You know, Jason Heath, you record a double bass piece, solo or otherwise, by composer XYZ, and you're like, no one's going to release it. Even if it might even just be a piece, might just be 12 minutes. It might be an hour and 12 minutes. And you're like, I really want to get this out. You give me a call. It will cost you basically what it cost me to distribute it up through the distributor, which is, I mean, for my EP, I think it cost me something like £38. That's up now. It's not even a yearly subscription. It's just, that's what it cost. And then, you know, whatever small costs it was to try and just my time to get it up and do a couple of things to it. But basically for under about 200 quid, you've got something worldwide distributed. Now, I've got a friend that's recorded some solo-based stuff. He's been quoted by an American distributor to distribute it physically and digitally and do his social media. $8,000 US. Now, I'm sorry, but social media-wise, the people that are going to want to listen to his CD, he knows already, or the people that he knows know. You know, right. The tour-based community is already socially connected. He doesn't need to pay someone $8,000 to have something social media savvy, you know. So we kind of are in a bit of a niche situation where there are other bass players, and not even bass players. If your wife decided that she wanted to record a harp thing, and she went, well, it'd be nice to have that up. I've got a 5-track or an 8-track CD here, and I don't really mind if it's not. I only deal with digital stuff. I don't really mind if it's not on a CD. I just want it up on iTunes. Well, I'll release it if she wants. You know, I'm trying to. Now it's there. It may as well be a useful tool. I'm trying to supply a platform for people, or if people want to do it themselves and have their own label, just get in contact with me. I'll tell you exactly what I did and how I did it, because it's not that hugely complicated and it's not that terribly expensive. It requires a bit of time and dedication, but it's possible. I remember I was emailing you, or I was talking to you. Maybe I was emailing you. I said, what I want is for people to listen to my quartet and go, I can do a lot better than that. And I think people will do a lot better than that. You know, this is my first try. I'm going to record lots of other stuff. I'm going to put it out. The mastering will be better. My goodness, mastering for streaming is very difficult. I didn't realize that was the hardest part. Actually, mastering for streaming. There are all sorts of ways you have to get it done. But I want people to hear it and go, I can do better than that. And I want them to go out and do better than that. I don't see why, you know, we're all these musicians and we're too afraid to release recordings of ourselves. Why? It's
Yeah, I think it speaks to that, what, at least in my experience, that especially particularly those of us who came up in the classical music tradition, I think it speaks to that obsession with perfection. We want to polish things until they're perfect in our rooms, and it's never good enough. And even when we play it in concert, we can do better. But the beauty of actually finishing something and getting out in the world and saying, as one of my favorite authors, Seth Godin, says, "Here, I made this," you know, and then just getting in the habit of putting putting something out in the world. It's great. It's a great project. You learn so much recording and doing that. And I haven't done anything exactly like that. Although I have been trying to do a couple of bass, just out of bored, bass duets by myself in my software with varying degrees of success. And maybe I'll ride that horse a little farther and actually get something done. But it's really cool to actually go through and have something to show for your efforts. And yeah, it's just a great self-improvement project. I love things like that are there, regardless of how many people end up consuming it, something that you get benefit out of doing. And I think it's inspiring. So people should definitely get in touch if they want to get some music out there. And we all are sitting, like my friends I was talking about on the call yesterday, with an abundance of time on our hands for the most part. At least we aren't preparing for concerts, certainly not here in California, at least. So yeah, it's cool. I applaud you getting that done. And I love that you have all these other projects on that. Have you always been like that? Were you like that back when you were freelancing, or is that more of a recent thing?
No. Unfortunately, I was like that when I was freelancing. This is like I said, the building the bass thing's 5.5 years in the making. I mean, I started that just before my wife had our first child. What a stupid thing to do. Why on earth would I commit myself to something else? But it's because I find these things that I can't possibly not do. I remember sitting there on a train commuting to and from some rehearsals once, and I think we'd bought a couple of kids' books because we knew we were about to have our first child. I remember reading through them going, it's not that hard. I could write a kid's book. I could do that. That'd be great. Why don't I do that? And I've got this bizarre, wacky, twisted mind that says, someone painted the roof of the Sistine Chapel. Well, he was just a man. Mm-hmm. I'm a man with the right direction. I could do that. Okay. Now, it's obviously ridiculous, but in some ways it speaks to what Jason Harheim was saying it's like, well, there is no talent. It's all about, the hours put in to build something. Now, it's funnily enough, I personally don't subscribe to that necessarily 100%. I think, because I know until I reached the UK and had to start actually working hard, I cruised through basically all of my degree. I didn't really practice. Mm-hmm. I played through things a couple of times, and then I went and did things. And so there was some sort of innate ability to do that. And it wasn't, I can honestly say, it wasn't through practice. And I wish I hadn't had that bit of talent, because I would have had to have worked harder and learnt how to practice sooner, if that makes sense. Yeah. So in some ways, I mean, I'm sure, Jason could show me books and go, okay, no, this is actually what happened. And he would probably be right. But in my own mind, I'm like, no, there was some sort of something that got me through those years that I wish hadn't, because it kind of stopped me learning how to do it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, talent's a complicated topic, and like it could be, if there isn't talent is just a shorthand for a bunch of processes. I'm actually reading the book that got Jason into the whole deliberate practice thing initially, which is called Talent is Overrated, which is much more of a business book than Anders Ericsson. Peak, I believe, is the title that Jason was talking about. I'll try to link up to this for folks who want to go down, or certainly link up to Jason's podcast. But yeah, I certainly, it's interesting to sort of think about, because I just sort of assume that people are born with innate talents and abilities, and I watch people, playing basketball somewhere, and I think I can't do, I'm certainly never going to do that. But it's interesting to ponder that, and I don't know, it's inspiring. Anybody who manages to improve over time and kind of level up. And I mean, do you attribute that concentrated practice to eventually landing the job that you have now? I mean, because I think people get caught in that freelance world and just sort of, they're like a spinning record. I know I certainly was. I was, every year was just like the last year. The gigs came and went. They were a little bit, but I wasn't really improving. Did you like Jason Jason, maybe did you those last few years of freelancing, did you start to do things differently, or was it just audition after audition and then you landed the gig?
I stopped doing auditions. Basically, once I started getting busy with the freelance stuff, I realized that doing trials was making me really miserable because I wasn't getting the job.
Yeah.
There are always reasons why I wasn't getting a job. But like I said, the trial system over here is a little bit different. You might have, I don't know, 80 people turn up to an audition, and of those 80 people, say 5 might get a trial. It's not the best person on the day wins. And in fact, through most of my time here, things have changed now, but through most of my time here, there's not even a screen. You turn up, you see the panel there, you play, you leave the room. They'll call you or send you a letter a couple of days later, say, hey, we'd like to offer you a trial. And then for 2 years or so, year and a half to 2 years, you come in and you do work with them over that period, and they find the person that they think fits their section the best.
Okay.
Now, the problem with that, I mean, it's a wonderful system in that it tends to hang on to orchestras' identities longer. So something like the Philharmonia string sound, they can hang on to that simply because they're not necessarily appointing the person that did the most fantastic audition on the day, but they're appointing the person that fits into their way of playing or has shown that they will learn how to fit into their way of playing the quickest and are willing to do that. Because you run the risk, if you appoint just the best person on the day, to put someone in the section that goes, I don't really want to do it like the rest of the way you guys do it. I was fantastic in my audition. I can play like this. Now, that's obviously, people don't do that. But there can be an element to that. And having the trial system can protect the identity of orchestras, but it's open to so much subjectivity. And, you know, there have been trials that basically ground me into the ground. I was like, I'm there. And then for whatever reason, it didn't go my way. And it just made me very unhappy. So then I did the freelancing thing for a long time. And I just kept going round and round and round and round and round. And I got to the end of my 30s. I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to not enjoy it. You know, I promised myself I would quit. So I lined up 2 more auditions. I thought, well, I'm really going to have to practice. I'm only doing 2 more auditions, BBC Concert Orchestra in London and the CBSO. And I thought, if I'm going to do these, I have to do it properly. So I went and started having lessons again with Tom Martin, who I had avoided having lessons with. We laugh about this now, he and I, but when I first arrived in London, I was told, because he was always a hero of mine. When I grew up, oh my God, listen, he was Bottesini. Sure. I grew up on those things. I love them. I'm going to go have lessons with Tom Martin. And then I first turned up in London and someone said, well, yeah, you take the risk. He's still, even though he's retired, he's still kind of the godfather of all the bass playing here in London. If he likes you, he'll get you a job. If he doesn't like you, you may as well just go and move country. You're not going to get any work. And I took that very seriously. Now, there was an element of truth to it, but as time went on, it became less and less like that. He just had such a history of teaching people that then got jobs. So eventually I went and saw Tom, and I realized that everything that he was teaching me, I had to physically change a lot of the way I played. And to do that, I had to kind of do this more concentrated practice because I had very little time. I was so busy freelancing that any of my time off at home was spent just in a practice room, trying again after so many years, looking at these excerpts. Thankfully, I'd had a big break from excerpts and from things like Van Halen, Kusavisky. Right, I'm going to look at these fresh and I'm going to literally pull them apart and just practice those 3 notes in these 10 different ways to make sure that that bit there is bomb-proof. Remember, there's a guy in Case Borsma's stand partner, a guy called Alex Henry. He used to be number 2 in Philharmonia. He's now the co-principal in Sydney. Before I moved over, I had a couple lessons with him, and he was teaching me all the way back then. He was like, right, you need to practice certain phrases so that they're bomb-proof. You need to be able to play that phrase 20 times in a row perfectly. Until you can do that, you haven't learned it. You have to make every phrase bomb-proof. And I kind of dismissed it at the time. It was too hard for me to do. I couldn't do it. So I dismissed it as, oh, only people like Alex can do that sort of thing. Well, no. You know, if you want to be at a certain level, you have to do that. You have to have that mentality. So I did that. Everything that Tom was teaching me, I did it so that in such small concentrated bits, you know, so that it became age. I actually changed the way I physically played again at the age of, I don't know, at the time I was about 36 or 37, and just, and just worked towards these two auditions. So yeah, I there was a point, and I actually had a job lined up outside of music to take on if I didn't get the CBSO job. I was ready to go, and I was at peace. I was very happy to do it. I was absolutely at peace. I was like, it's time. I'll be 40 by then, or 39 or 40, I think. I'll have had a wild ride. I've done all that stuff, and no one can take that away from me. I've done all this great stuff, and I'll happily go and sit in an office job and do something else, and that's absolutely fine. And for the first time, I was very at peace about not playing music anymore. But the two things that got the job for me at CBSO was, one, all the work I did with Tom and changing that, and all that concentrated practice about changing just little things. Stop looking at trying to play a big melody and this and making it sound like, no, actually be able to do that shift. I've played that shift so many times. Recording yourself, of course, everyone says that. Anyone that's ever been successful at playing the bass or any instrument has worked out you have to record yourself. And listening back and going, oh, and listening back with the keyboard. This is one of Duncan McTeer's things, is playing against the keyboard, playing a passage, and then you realize just how out of tune it is. You hear it so many times in your head and you think it's in tune, and then you play it against the piano and you're like, it's really not. I started doing the accompaniments, piano accompaniments, and doing all of my practice for an audition to the piano accompaniment, so that when I went into that audition, it wasn't like, whoa, because of course your intonation is then based on the piano. Whereas if you're not practicing to a piano part, when you walk into that 20 minutes of warm up you get, you're frantically trying to make sure you can nail that Heldenleben arpeggio. And then the person comes and goes, okay, we've got 5 minutes to play through your Van Hart with you. And that's a complete disaster, because of course your intonation's not matched to a piano because you haven't practiced for the last 3 months to a piano. It hasn't locked. So I did everything to try and make that audition experience right, including, recording and everything very concentrated. It basically became my one goal was to nail these two auditions. And I got the trials, and the BBC concert didn't work out, but the CBSO did work out. And that it's just, it's a strange thing to win your first job at the age of 40. But the other thing that got me the job was the fact that I had experience. I'm sure that I wasn't the best auditionee in on the days. I heard some other people's auditions from outside. They sounded flipping amazing, nailing everything. I know I did a nice audition. It was good enough to get a trial. And that's the lovely thing about the trial system, is that it does catch you a bit of slack to prove yourself in the job sometimes as well. Even if you haven't, often on a panel, they can tell, okay, this guy's got quality. For some reason, he's a bit nervous today and he's not on his game. There's something about him. I think we're going to give him a trial to try things out. And then you can prove yourself so then in the situation, I played all the rep before. I knew it inside out from touring it and doing this and doing that. And none of it was a surprise. I went and I was so relaxed. It was not an issue. I wasn't a bunny in headlights going, oh my goodness, here I am in the CBSO playing. No, it wasn't a big deal. It was fun. It was great fun. They wanted to hear if I could play loud. Fine, I'll play loud. They wanted to hear if I could play soft. No, I play soft, whatever. That. And Tony at the time said, look, I looked through your CV. I see you worked with this orchestra, and this orchestra for this many years. And I checked, and you're still working with these people. That means one thing. It means that you haven't pissed them off.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes to me. So that experience, I didn't need to go to music college to do the postgrad. I needed to sit in those orchestras for 10 years. 16 years I freelanced in London in the end, and just learn how to do the job, basically. That's the only way I got the job, is because I hung around for such a long time that people kind of had to go, well, yeah, he can do the job. Maybe we should give him the job in the end,
It's inspiring to hear your path. And I too grew up, at least in the the circles in which I traveled with, 30 being like the cutoff mark for better go do something else. I think some of my friends had pacts they made with each other to hold themselves accountable. And but I've also talked to several musicians, not necessarily on bass, but that into their 40s was their first full-time job. And I love that you had something you'd already planned. If it didn't work out with these trials, that might have freed you up mentally a little bit too. And it's cool, you take all that time and put all that energy in and really take it all apart with Tom and record yourself. And those are all skills that would benefit you in other areas of life. And that's how I love to approach any project, whether it's the recording project you've done during this pandemic, but that's certainly, I'm guessing, made you all of a sudden you're thinking about your bass playing in a different way and cutting it up and maybe learning some skills that you hadn't done as much of. So anything that can have a purpose that just making you better regardless of the outcome. Jeremy, this is super fun. We could do this. We could do this every month. I have so much to talk. Maybe we could close it out here and do a round 2 sometime. And if once your starts traveling, I don't know that you make it out to California. That's a hellish trip. But do you ever?
Yeah, we were supposed to be there in November in about a monthth's time.
Whoa!
We were doing San Francisco, yeah.
In a parallel universe, we would be sharing a pint right now instead of being on Zoom.
Been rescheduled. I'll see you in 2022. That sounds like it's going to happen. 2022 is when it's been rescheduled for. So we should be doing basically an N shape of America, starting in Costa Mesa, up through LA, San Francisco, over, and then down through New York, and maybe down the coast. It all changes and will change into you, but that's the general shape of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful. Well, I'm just a short walk from the hall, and I'm in this great neighborhood steeped in history. Jack Kerouac and all the beat poets used to hang out at places here. So, and the pandemic certainly won't eliminate all of them. So I'm sure we can find a place to grab a pint and have a stroll. And I will be in your neck of the woods again sometime soon. I was actually in Leeds at the end of January, filming a course right before the pandemic, and
I saw it. It's up. I got emails about it today. I forgot to do this. I did see this. It looks amazing. So I was going to ask if he went to you. I know Jeff. Bizarrely, I know Jeff. That's a story for another time.
That's small world. I was actually doing a Facebook Live with Jeff, so this is my second call to the UK today. But yeah, it was great. It was one of those things. I should have had my head examined because all I did was go to Leeds and go right back to San Francisco. But it's because I had an event right before, an event right after. I just didn't have time. But of course I would have gone to London and explored. So I'll be. You may be here before I'm there, but I'd love to just hang out and certainly do a round 2 and do it in person. I love doing these things in noisy bars and in parks and whatever. It's all fun. So this has been a blast. Jeremy, thank you so much. Check out Jeremy's website, jeremywatt.co.uk, which is a beautiful website, by the way. I'm always impressed when I am talking to somebody and I go and I see just a beautifully designed and laid out storytelling sort of website. That is definitely Jeremy's website. And I guess maybe that's not surprising given what a great storyteller he is. And like I said in this talk, interview, whatever, chat, I can't wait to meet him in person, hang out, spend some time together. You probably hear me say that a lot on this show, but it's definitely something that I miss these last 9 months or whatever. I've been locked away, and I'm sure you miss as well. And that was a direction that I was really enjoying with the podcast, and I can't wait to get back to doing in-person, not going to edit, Jason, in-person conversations. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I had too many beers, and I ended up ordering 2 of these pod mics, mainly just because I think my old mics looked dorky on video. So I here in my place in San Francisco, and I am envisioning how we're going to do some live conversations when folks are coming through town and such. That'll probably be 2024 or whatever, but I'm planning about it, thinking about it now, setting up cameras, getting some nice quality content. There's something just so great about in person. And then I have these mics I've used forever, just some Shure SM58s that are perfect road mics for when I'm traveling to Australia or New York, which were the 2 big trips I took that were exclusively for the podcast. I'm really looking forward to doing more of that, because then it's a hang. Zoom chats are great, and sometimes they sound good. Like Jeremy had a great mic on. Sometimes they sound like hot garbage, and we just do what we can. But and it's a hang still, but it's not obviously the same. I had such a great time in that Australia trip. I feel so fortunate to have squeezed that in before everything shut down, and it has been heartening to look in other parts of the world, though as I record this is episode 2 of 4 that I'm recording the day before Thanksgiving. So wherever you are in the future, that's just what's up. It's been heartening to follow along with Ben Puglisi's son, Leonardo Puglisi, his wonderful YouTube channel, 6 News Australia. And just to see how things are opening back up in Australia and getting back to normal, and the mask mandate has been eased, at least in the Melbourne area. So it's nice to see, as I sit in San Francisco and things are actually getting worse, and California's shutting back down, and all dining is ending, and we've got to stink and run on toilet paper again. Really, people? Really? We're back at that? Okay, so that's what's up as I record this. And we've just canceled our holiday plans, which is not surprising, but depressing, of course. And I have yet to leave the city of San Francisco. I haven't left since the first week of March because I don't know where I would go. Maybe Oakland, but anyway, I am ranting. But it's just nice, especially when we're locked down like this. I'm a social creature. Well, I guess we're all social creatures. That's a kind of a dumb statement, but I'm always thinking about the next trip and where I'm going and who I'm going to connect with. And it's just nice to connect with people in other parts of the world like Jeremy over Zoom, and just to sort of think about when we're going to be able to do things in person again. And to know that his orchestra is planning on coming here to San Francisco, to the Bay Area soon. I got that on my mental calendar, and I'm looking forward to it. I am really curious about 2021 and things like the International Society of Bassists Convention in Lincoln, Nebraska. If you're listening to this and you got all the way through the interview and you're listening to me, you are what I would consider a true fan, or you're tied to a chair and can't turn off, or running and can't turn off your podcast player. But I am curious if this thing is going to go off in person at all. I guess I'll riff on this a little bit because I've been going for a few minutes anyway. So, reasons why I almost certainly expect that it'll be some sort of hybrid thing, right? Some sort of virtual, some sort of physical, because, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way everything's going to be for a long time. And there are some benefits to that. It's challenging to get to a place, like let's take Lincoln, Nebraska in early June, which is when school is still in session for a lot of places. If you're not a United States States or United States adjacent person. Getting to the middle of the United States is a challenge from Europe, Australia, whatever. Though it's called the International Society of Bassists, every convention's held in the U.S., so take that for what it's worth. Yeah, I'll be curious. If there is an in-person component, I think it's highly likely I will go, in part because I am from a town about 3.5 hours away from there, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And like I said, I just canceled Christmas plans with Mom, and my brother and his wife are planning on heading out to South Dakota, so we'll probably try to coordinate something. If it's totally virtual, who knows? I don't know. I got to get out of San Francisco. But before I do that, I will escape this long-winded outro and thank the team that put these episodes together with me. They are Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, Trevor Jones, Krista Copper, and by the way, I forgot to thank Mitch in the last outro. Mitch, I am terribly apologetic. That's rare. So Mitch makes beautiful basses. They are great. He won award for tone at the last International Society of Bassists Convention. He works out of Kilgore, Texas, which is a little east of Dallas-Fort Worth. Check him out online, mitchmooring.com. I am your totally on whatever long-winded, not editing outro host, Jason Heath. And we will see you again soon for more Life on the Low End of the Spectrum.